and the distinguished majority whip for his participation and expressing alarm and concern over these circumstances, and ask him to make any comments he cares to make.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader is recognized.
it's my honor to join my colleague and friend, Senator Cornyn of Texas. We're on opposite sides of the aisle, but we're on the same side on this issue. Listen to what America has said about what's happening in Syria. Almost 8,000 innocent people have been killed in the streets of Syria by Bashar Assad, the dictator. The people who expressed their concern and objection to his policies are mowed down and killed in the streets. Their homes are bombed, and nothing is being done. Sadly, the United States, when it tried to engage the United Nations Security Council to condemn this action, to join the Arab League and others condemning what Assad is doing to these innocent people, our efforts were stopped by China and Russia. The relationship between Russia and Syria is well documented. They have been close allies for many years. We also know that they are providing about $1 billion in Russian military aid to the Syrian dictator to kill his own people in the streets. That's part of this. And I have to join Senator Cornyn in saying how concerned we are when we learn that one of the leading military exporters of Russia, this Rosoboron export, is doing business not only in Syria, but with the United States government. Now, I understand the history of this. We're buying Russian helicopters to help the Afghans defend their country against the Taliban. The helicopter of choice in Afghanistan today is the old Soviet, I believe it's M-17, M-18 helicopter. So our government is buying these Russian helicopters to give to the Afghan government to fight the Taliban. We are, in fact, doing business with the very same company and country that is subsidizing the massacre in Syria. It is right for us, as members of Congress, to make that point to Secretary Panetta and the Department of Defense. I think it is also appropriate for us to ask why we are not converting the Afghan defense forces, the security forces, to another helicopter. Can I be so bold as to suggest it be made in the United States of America since we're paying for it? Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we creating jobs here in America and training these Afghans on helicopters that come from our country, that are as good or better than anything the Soviets ever put in the air? I don't have a preference on an American helicopter. Don't have any producers in my state, so I'm not into that particular bidding war. I wouldn't get into it. But I do believe sending a word to the Russians immediately that our relationship of buying these helicopters in Afghanistan so that we can subsidize their military sales to Syria should come to an end. That's what this letter is about. We cannot pass resolutions on the floor condemning the bloodshed in Syria and ignore the obvious connection. Russian military arms moving into Syria, killing innocent people. Let me show for the record here, I noticed that Senator from Texas brought a photograph with him. This photo that I'm going to show here is one of a Russian warship, an aircraft carrier, docked at the Syrian port of Tartus on January 8th of this year. What we couldn't turn into a poster is the video clip showing the Russian warship captains being greeted like royalty by the Syrian Minister of Defense who went out to welcome the ship. This this Russian aircraft carrier was launched from a port used by this same export company. I can't go any further in saying that the particular company involved sent goods on this particular ship, but the fact of the matter is obvious. Syria has become a major supplier of military arms to the Syrian dictator who is killing innocent people. We are doing business with that same military company, Rosoboron Export. It is time for us to step back and say to the Russians, we can no longer continue this relationship. If you are going to subsidize the killing of innocent people, we cannot afford to do business with you. America, we have to acknowledge the obvious. No matter what they are paying, it isn't worth the loss of innocent life in Syria. I thank the Senator from Texas for joining me. I think we have another 16 or 17 colleagues who are joining us in this effort, bipartisan effort, to raise this issue. And I hope that the Russians will understand once and for all they can't play both sides of the street, and we in the United States should draw the line. I thank the senator from Texas.
Would the senator yield for a question? Is the senator aware that the very same arms merchant, Rosoboron Export, I think is the way it's pronounced, or something close to that, has also been documented in selling weapons to Iran and Venezuela? As a matter of fact, according to one published report as late as 2005, Rosoboron Export sold Iran 29 Tor M1 anti-air missile systems worth $700 million. And Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps successfully tested this anti-air missile system in 2007. It's also reported that in 2012, Russia will deliver T-72 tanks, BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles, and BTR-80A armored personnel carriers to Venezuela, just in our back door in South America. And that in the last 5 years alone, Hugo Chavez, a dictator with strong ties to Cuba, and Fidel Castro, that Venezuela bought $11 billion worth of weapons through Rosoboron Export in the last 5 years. I wonder, do you find that surprising or
I would say
equally alarming?
Say to the senator from Texas, a point which you made earlier, and I think bears repeating at this moment in our dialogue. Rosoboron Export is the Russian state-controlled arms export firm. This is no so-called private company. This is a firm run by the Russian government. And as you go through the litany of countries that they are supplying, you are going through a litany of countries that have never, in recent times, had the best interests of the United States at heart. And if the Russians, through their government company, want to supply Iran, which we know is an exporter of terrorism, not only in the Middle East but around the world and in the United States, if we want to supply them, if they want to supply sniper rifles and arms to the Syrians to kill their own people, why in the world are we doing business with them? There ought to be a line that we draw at some point. We have no obligation, moral obligation, to do business with a firm that is in fact supplying those that are killing innocent people and our enemies around the world. I thank the senator from Texas for raising those points.
I would also ask the distinguished majority whip whether he was aware of the testimony within the last couple of weeks before the Armed Services Committee, Secretary Panetta, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with a lot of attention being placed on Iran, the principal state sponsor of international terrorism in America, in the world today, and a destabilizing influence in the Middle East, seeking as they are a nuclear weapon which would create at very least a nuclear arms race in the Middle East and a consequential destabilizing area of that region. I know the senator is aware that Syria is one of the principal proxies for Iran, and General Dempsey and Secretary Panetta both said that if Syria were to go by the wayside, as various other countries have in the Arab Spring, that it would be a serious blow to Iran's aspirations for hegemony in the Middle East, and something that's dangerous to the peace and stability of that important region. I know the senator is aware of the close relationship between Syria and Iran, but I would wonder if you'd care to comment on that connection.
I would say to the senator from Texas, and I'm sure he has studied this as I have, it is hard to parse out the elements in the Middle East and to decide who is fighting for which team. But when it comes to Syria, consistently they have allied themselves with Iran. And in that alliance, Iran has been very supportive of Syria and Hezbollah, and another group, terrorist group that is operating primarily through Syria. And so that close connection there is a matter of concern to me. Our goal in the Middle East is to create stability and to stop the march of these dictators in the Middle East who are killing innocent people and denying them their most basic rights. We have tried everything, short of military intervention, which I do not call for in the Syrian situation. But we have tried everything else, diplomatic and economic, to put pressure on Syria. We should continue to. And we should join with other nations and continue the efforts at the United Nations. But we can't get this job done when Russia plays the role of outlier, supplying both Syria and Iran with military arms and support. If they want to truly join us in a stable situation in the Middle East, they should tell Assad it's over. And it clearly is over. This man could never legitimately govern Syria from this point forward after killing so many innocent people. And I hope what we are doing today is suggesting to this administration and Secretary Panetta another avenue to let the Russians know that we find it unacceptable for them to be supplying arms to what is a destabilizing influence in that part of the world.
Mr. President, I can't recall whether I asked unanimous consent, but if I haven't done it to this point, I'd ask unanimous consent that the letter that we're referring to, that we 17 senators sent to Secretary Panetta, be included in the record at the close of this colloquy.
Without objection, so ordered.
Next. Well, I know, Mr. President, there are other senators who, as signatories of this letter, who may well be coming to the floor to talk more about this issue, but I want to express my gratitude to Senator Durbin. It's important that the United States speak out on behalf of people who have no real voice in defense of their most basic human rights, and point out that President Assad and his regime not only are killing innocent civilians, but also being supplied by Russia, who also, maybe not coincidentally, Senator Durbin also vetoed the sanctions that the UN was considering with regard to Iran. So it's very important that not only we speak up on behalf of the people who have no voice and no defense, but we also make sure that the United States government, at the very minimum, isn't doing business with the very same arms merchants that's supplying weapons to President Assad with which to kill innocent Syrians. I thank the chair. I'm advised that Senator Ayotte was planning on coming. She's a signatory to this letter, a member of the Armed Services Committee, and shares many of these same concerns, but she's not going to be able to come at this time. I'm sure she'll be commenting on this later. So with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and thank my colleague.
Assistant Majority Leader is recognized.
I join in thanking my colleague from Texas for speaking with me on this issue that we are working on together. And, Mr. President, I have 8 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask consent to speak in morning business.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I've been in the House and Senate for a number of years, and after a while you detect certain trends. And one of the things which I am wary of, having seen over the years the abuses associated with it, are these freight train bills that just seem like they're moving so fast with big majority support. Bills that oftentimes will pass one chamber or the other and come roaring into the other chamber, and maybe pass too quickly, and usually with regret. At a later point, someone stops, reflects, and says, we went too far. We didn't read into this all the things that could occur. We should have taken a little more time, because at the end of the day, a lot of innocent people suffered. The Senate historically has been the chamber, I served in the House, but the Senate historically has been the chamber that has, as George Washington characterized it, been the saucer that cooled the tea. I served in the House of Representatives, and with elections every 2 years, the presiding officer knows many members of the House kind of move quickly on issues because here comes another election campaign, and you don't want to miss an opportunity. The Senate, with longer terms and a different set of rules, tries to be more deliberate, sometimes too deliberate, I might add, but at least has that charge under our Constitution. The reason I'm raising this point is we have a bill that is coming over from the House, and the Republicans' leader has been frantic to bring this bill to the floor. It is characterized by the Republicans as a House jobs bill. It is, in fact, a bill which relates to startups, new businesses, and the regulatory requirements of these businesses. And what the bill basically does is exempt a large number of new startup companies from basic regulation. I have a letter, Mr. President, that I'd ask unanimous consent be entered in the record, a letter of March 13th of this year by Mary Shapiro, who is the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Securities and Exchange Commission is a federal agency created under the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt after the Great Depression. What happened when the stock market cratered in the Great Depression was that Franklin Roosevelt stepped up and said, we need to have an agency that will oversee and regulate Wall Street so that people who would care to invest in American companies have confidence that they're investing in a company and a process that follows a rule of law. There will be transparency, disclosure by these companies on a regular basis by formula as to what they are earning, what they are losing, what their assets may be. That has continued for almost 80 years. And the Securities and Exchange Commission has created in the process a credible market in the United States of America for the sale of equities and securities. Now comes this bill from the House of Representatives, this so-called jobs bill, that wants to change that. And what they are suggesting is that when certain companies get started, startup companies, that they be excused from requirements under the law from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The argument that was made was there's just too much paperwork, too many regulations, and smaller startup companies can't get started because there are too many legal requirements. Well, first you take a look at what they consider to be smaller companies getting started. And they define them as companies with $1 billion a year in annual revenue. $1 billion. Unfortunately, those who make over $1 billion in revenue in a year comprise only about 10% of American businesses. That means that, by definition, they are characterizing 90% of American businesses and startups as smaller businesses that need a special break when it comes to regulation. So over the years, we get into a debate, whether it's the regulation of banks or the regulation of these startup companies or those that are going public selling securities. Over the years, we get into a debate about whether the government's gone too far. Are there too many rules? And I'm open to that suggestion. I think that we should be open to it. If there is a way to protect the public and investors and still create businesses in this country that generate jobs, I want to hear about it, and I want to support it. But too often we go too far. And when we go too far and are not careful, some terrible things have occurred. The letter that I have now entered into the record from Mary Shapiro with the Securities and Exchange Commission addresses this bill. And she says, and I quote, "While I recognize that H.R. 3606 is the product of bipartisan effort designed to facilitate capital formation and include certain promising approaches," she says, "I believe that there are provisions that should be added or modified to improve investor protection that are worthy of the Senate's consideration." The administration has said that they are open to the idea of changing some of these laws. What Mary Shapiro, the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, has suggested is that we put provisions in the bill here in the Senate which will protect investors. Yesterday I spoke about testimony before the committee, and I'm going to ask, so that it is a matter of record, for consent that the statement of Professor John Coffey, Adolph Burrell Professor of Law from Columbia University Law School, at a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee on December 1st, 2011, be made a part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want my colleagues, many of whom have just read a few press accounts of this bill, to consider carefully the statement made by Professor Coffey. He's analyzed this bill and raised some important questions about whether it goes too far. Now, I'll be joining some of my colleagues here in offering a substitute which improves the law for startup companies, but also makes certain that we protect investors and make certain as well that at the end of the day we don't end up with egg on our face. How many times has Congress been called on when the private sector runs amok, goes too far, and starts failing in every direction to bail them out? We saw it most graphically with the bailout of the major banks not that many years ago. We've seen it in the past with the bailout of the savings and loan industry. We've seen it happen time and time again. Who ends up holding the bag when government regulation is not adequate to make sure that people don't go overboard? The American taxpayers. They end up holding the bag, not to mention innocent victims along the way. I would say, I understand I just have a minute or two left, a note was given to me here. I understand that we have got to change the law, but I'm hoping that we can change it in a constructive way. Opening up the sale of stocks and securities to everyone who can pull up a chair and open a laptop is not in the best interest of investors across America. It's certainly not in the best interest of many Americans who would find themselves losing their life savings and any investment funds that they might have in the process. Making certain that the people who sell these stocks are in fact registered and credible, making certain that the statements they make can be backed up with hard evidence as opposed to a promise, making sure as well that we have in the process of this undertaking the safeguards in place so that there won't be excessive, as I said yesterday, irrational exuberance that leads to the failure of any marketplace or securities. That, to me, is the best thing that we can achieve. These two items that I've entered into the record, I think establish, both from Mary Shapiro, Chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as Professor Coffey, the case for being careful. Let's not jump on this freight train and watch it as it plows into a barricade. Let's make certain what we do is thoughtful. It does engender economic growth, but not at the expense of the integrity of America's financial markets or at the expense of innocent investors. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that senators be permitted to speak as if in morning business for the next 90 minutes, with the majority controlling the first 45 minutes, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes, and the Republicans controlling the final 45 minutes.
Is there objection? So ordered.
Mr. President, I'm honored to be here today with the women senators to talk about the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, a law that has a history of passing this chamber with broad bipartisan support. I would note that there are many authors of this bill, I think up to something like 58 authors currently, and the women that are speaking today include myself and Senator Feinstein, Senator Hagan, Senator Murkowski, Senator Shaheen, Senator Murray, Senator Boxer. Also sponsoring the bill are Senator Collins and Snowe and Senator McCaskill, Gillibrand, Cantwell, Landrieu, Mikulski, and Stabenow. The bill is led by Senator Leahy and Senator Crapo. And so we're here today to pledge our support for this bill and ask our colleagues to move forward with this bill. The Violence Against Women Act was a landmark bill when it first became law back in 1994. Back then it started a sea change in attitudes about violence against women, and it sent a strong message to the country saying that sexual assault and domestic violence are serious offenses that will not be tolerated. We heard that message loud and clear in my state, and I'm proud to say that our state has always had a strong tradition of standing up against these crimes. In fact, no conversation in our state about domestic abuse would be complete without mentioning former Senator Paul Wellstone and his wife Sheila, who we miss dearly. The Wellstones put so much time and energy into bringing these issues out of the shadows, into taking a subject that many people considered at the time a family matter and saying, you know what, domestic violence isn't just something we can sweep under a rug. It's a crime, it hurts families, it hurts children, and we're going to do something about it. And while I led the prosecutor's office in Hennepin County, Minnesota for 8 years, we put a lot of focus on the victim's needs and particularly the children's needs in domestic violence cases. Because it doesn't take a bruise or a broken bone for a child to be a victim of domestic violence. Kids who witness domestic violence are victims too. In fact, we had a poster up on the wall in our office, Madam President, and it was a poster of a woman with a Band-Aid on her nose holding a baby. And it said, "Beat your wife and your kid goes to jail." You know why? The statistics show that kids who grow up in violent homes are 76 times more likely to commit acts of domestic violence themselves. It's a sobering number, and overall the statistics for these kinds of crimes are staggering. More than 1 in 3 women in the United States have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And every year, close to 17,000 people lose their lives to domestic violence. So once again, this is not just a family matter. This is a matter of life and death, and not just for the victims, but oftentimes for the law enforcement officers who are all too often caught in the line of fire. I've seen this in my own state. In fact, I saw it just a few months ago when I attended the funeral of Sean Schneider, a young police officer in Lake City, Minnesota. Officer Schneider died after responding to a domestic violence call. A 17-year-old girl was being abused by her boyfriend. When Officer Schneider arrived at the scene, he was shot in the head. He literally gave his life to save another. I attended that funeral, Madam President, and I still remember those 3 little children, the 2 boys and the little girl with the blue dress with stars on it, going down the aisle of the church. And when you see that, you realize that the victims of domestic violence aren't just the immediate victims. It is an entire family. It is an entire community. So we know all too well just how devastating domestic violence and sexual violence can be to victims, as well as to entire communities, which is why it was such a good thing that 6 weeks ago we passed a VAWA reauthorization bill out of the Judiciary Committee, and that the bill has the support of 58 senators, including 6 Republicans. I'm glad that this bill has continued to attract bipartisan support. I wish it was unanimous. Just 7 years ago, in fact, the reauthorization bill passed the House by a vote of 415 to 4, and it passed the Senate by unanimous consent with 18 Republican co-sponsors. I know that this year some of my Republican colleagues on the Judiciary Committee are not supportive of this bill, but it's my hope that while they may disagree with the bill, they will not stop this bipartisan bill from advancing. Combating domestic violence and sexual assault is an issue that we should all be able to agree on. Many of the provisions in the reauthorization bill made important changes to the current law. The bill consolidates duplicative programs and streamlines others. It provides greater flexibility in the use of grant money by adding more purpose areas to the list of allowable uses. It has new training requirements for people providing legal assistance to victims, and it takes important steps to address the disproportionately high domestic violence rates in Native American communities. The bill also fills some gaps in the system, and I'm pleased to say it includes the legislation that I introduced with Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson to address high-tech stalking, cases where stalkers use technology like the Internet, video surveillance, and bugging to stalk their victims. The bill will give law enforcement better tools for cracking down on stalkers. Just as with physical stalking, high-tech stalking may foreshadow more serious behavior down the road. It's an issue we need to take seriously. We need our tools for our law enforcement to be as sophisticated as those who are breaking the law. Now, I can tell you, I want to end with this. I know that Senator Feinstein is coming soon, and we have a number of women that are going to be speaking today. But I want to remind everyone in this chamber that domestic violence takes its toll. One of the most memorable cases that I had in our office when our office prosecuted a case of a woman who was killed in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. She was a Russian immigrant. Her husband was a Russian immigrant. They didn't have many friends in the community. She was fairly isolated. She was most likely a domestic violence victim for many, many years. Well, one day this man killed his wife. He then took her body parts down to Missouri. He left some of the body parts there, and the entire time he had their 4-year-old daughter in the car with him. He then drove back to Minnesota, confessed to the crime. And when they had the funeral, there was only me, our domestic violence advocate, and the grandparents that had come to Russia, and this woman's identical twin sister. And what had happened at the airport when they arrived was that this little 4-year-old girl who had never seen her aunt, who had never seen her mother's identical twin sister, ran down that hallway when she saw her aunt for the first time and hugged her and said, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," because she thought that her mom was back. It reminds us all that domestic violence isn't just about one victim. It's about children, it's about family, and it's about a community. And we all know that this bill has always enjoyed broad bipartisan support. The women of the Senate knows it. There are already 3 Republican women on this bill, and many others, I hope, to come. We believe in this bill. We ask our colleagues to support this bill. I see that my colleague, Senator Feinstein, is here, and I know that as a member of the Judiciary Committee, she and I are the only 2 women members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She has taken the lead on this issue for many, many years. Thank you very much, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from California.
Madam President, I want to thank the Senator from Minnesota for her remarks. For a long time, I had been the only woman on the Judiciary Committee, and I'm just delighted that she is there as well, and that we share the same point of view with respect to this bill. I rise today to urge the Republican leadership of the Senate to allow this piece of legislation that protects American women from the plague, and it is a plague, of domestic violence, stalking, dating violence, and sexual assault to come to the floor of this Senate for a vote. I was in the Judiciary Committee. I voted for the original Violence Against Women Act. It was authorized for 6 years. We reauthorized it. It served another 6 years, and now the bill is up for reauthorization. It came out, surprisingly, from the Judiciary Committee on a split vote. And unfortunately, that was a split-party vote. I might say I was stunned by this vote because never before had there been any controversy in all of more than a decade and a half in all of this time about this bill. This act is the centerpiece of the federal government's effort to combat domestic violence and sexual assault. And it has actually impacted positively response to these crimes at the local, state, and federal level, and I hope to show this. The bill authorizes a number of grant programs administered by the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services to provide funding for emergency shelter, counseling, and legal services for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. As a matter of fact, I was thinking last night when I was mayor of San Francisco, back in the early 80s, I started the first home for battered women, which was Casa de las Madres, and we were able to fund it because it was such a critical need. Women being battered had no place to go and therefore often stayed in the home where they were battered again and again. This bill also provides support for state agencies, rape crisis centers, and organizations that provide services to vulnerable women. And American women are safer because we took action. Today, more victims report incidents of domestic violence to the police, and the rate of non-fatal partner violence against women has decreased by 53% since this bill went into effect in 1994. These figures are from the Department of Justice. So here we have a 53% decrease in the rate of non-fatal partner violence. The need for the services was highlighted in a recent survey by the Centers for Disease Control, which found that on average, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in the United States. 24 a minute by an intimate partner in the United States. Over the course of the year now, that equates to more than 12 million women and men. In California, my state, 30,000 people access crisis intervention services from one of California's 63 rape crisis centers in 2010 and 2011. These centers primarily rely on federal Violence Against Women Act funding, not state funding, to provide services to victims in communities. In 2009 alone, there were more than 167,000 cases in California in which local, county, or state police officers were called to the scene of a domestic violence complaint. 167,000 cases. That's many. Despite the fact that the underlying bill has 58 co-sponsors from both parties, not a single Republican member of the Judiciary Committee voted to advance the legislation. Now, the bill that came out of Judiciary does have some changes, and I want to talk about them for a moment. It creates one very modest new grant program. It consolidates 13 existing programs. It reduces authorization levels for all other programs by nearly 20%. And the savings, 17%. The bill is reduced in cost by 17%. That's $136 million. It encourages effective enforcement of protective orders. That's a big problem. Women get protective orders and they're violated because they're not enforced. And it reduces the national backlog of untested rape kits. A real problem if a jurisdiction can't test a rape kit. Yet there are some who refuse to support it because it now includes expanded protections for victims. And let me put this on the table. The bill includes lesbian and gay men. The bill includes undocumented immigrants who are victims of domestic abuse. The bill gives Native American tribes authority to prosecute crimes. In my view, these are improvements. Domestic violence is domestic violence. I asked my friends on the other side, if the victim in a same-sex relationship, is the violence any less real? Is the danger any less real because you happen to be gay or lesbian? I don't think so. If a family comes to the country and the husband beats his wife to a bloody pulp, do we say, well, you're illegal, I'm sorry, you don't deserve any protection? 911 operators, police officers don't refuse to help victim because of their sexual orientation or the country where they were born or their immigration status. When you call the police in America, they come regardless of who you are. The Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2011 is supported by 50 national religious organizations, including the Presbyterian Church, the Episcopal Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the National Council of Jewish Women, the National Council of Catholic Women, and the United Church of Christ and the United Methodist Church. So I go back to my days as mayor and sing over and over again, up close and personal in a city, what happens because of domestic violence. I see police getting killed when they go into a domestic violence. We had a number of funerals of police officers in Oakland, which I attended, and it all stemmed from domestic violence. So to defeat this bill is almost to say we don't need to consider violence against women. It's not an important issue. It is. It's not a partisan issue. It never has been in this body, which is why, candidly, I'm surprised that I find myself on the floor urging that this bill be brought to the floor, because it's been historically, through 2 reauthorizations, a bipartisan bill. You can't help but notice this isn't the first time when a policy that would specifically imperil the health and safety of American women has compelled some of us to come to this floor and speak out on behalf of American women. I hope that this bill is not part of a march. And that march, as I see it over the past 20 years, has been to cut back on rights and services to women. And I mean that most sincerely. I have never seen anything like it. When I came here, there were discussions over Roe v. Wade. When I first went on the Judiciary Committee, which was in 1993, I heard it. There were debates over Supreme Court opinions, Casey et al. Then there were debates over partial birth abortion. Then this year we fought against the Blunt Amendment, which would have effectively allowed employers to arbitrarily decline to provide 4 pages of critical preventive health care services for women. You know, we've had to fight for the simplest thing. I think young women forget that it took till 1920 for women to get the vote in this country. And it was only because women fought for it. And we have fought since the country was established for the right to vote, for the right to inherit property, for the right to go to school, and now we fight for our rights to have sufficient service from the government with respect to our health. So now I'm here to fight for a bill that strengthens laws and protects women against domestic violence and sexual assault. To me, this bill is a no-brainer. It has the support of both sides of the aisle. It's bipartisan. It saves lives. It is a lifeline for women and children who are in distress, who have no place to go other to stay and submit to domestic violence abuse. And no one can say I'm exaggerating. Trust me, I have seen it. I've seen the bruised bodies, up close and personal. And this bill has reduced the number of assaults, domestic assaults on women. The record indicates that. It should be continued. It's a no-brainer. I hope it's brought to the floor. I hope we maintain a bipartisan vote, and I hope it's reauthorized. Thank you. I yield the floor.
The senator from Minnesota.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Feinstein. We've now been joined by the senator from Washington, Senator Murray, who's been long time fighting for domestic violence bills. Thank you.
Madam President.
The senator from Washington.
Madam President, thank you so much. And I want to thank my colleague from California, Senator Feinstein, for her longtime advocacy on this, and to our colleague from Minnesota, Senator Klobuchar, for leading the effort this year to reauthorize this critically important bill to protect women in this country from violence. I was very proud to be here with the senator from California back in 1994 when we first passed the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA, as we call it, which created this national strategy for dealing with domestic violence. And since we took that first historic step, VAWA has been a great success in coordinating victims' advocates and social service providers and law enforcement professionals to meet the immediate challenges of combating domestic violence. This law has helped provide life-saving assistance to hundreds of thousands of women and their families. It's been supported by Democrats and Republicans, along with law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, victim service providers, faith leaders, healthcare professionals, advocates, and survivors. VAWA has attained such broad support for one reason: it's worked. Since it became law 18 years ago, domestic violence has decreased by 53%. And while incidents have gone down, reporting of violence and abuse has gone up. More victims are finally coming forward, and more women and families are getting the support and the care they need to move themselves out of dangerous situations. As a result of the language in this law, every single state has made stalking a crime, and they've all strengthened criminal rape statutes. Madam President, we have made a lot of progress since 1994, but we still have a long way to go. Every single minute, 24 people across America are victims of violence by an intimate partner, more than 12 million people a year. 45% of the women killed in this country die at the hands of their partner. And in one day last year, victims of domestic violence made more than 10,000 requests for supports and services that could not be met because programs didn't have the resources. That's why I was so proud to co-sponsor and strongly support the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. And it's why I join my colleagues today in proudly expressing our hope that we can move this critical legislation when possible. This is a bipartisan bill that will advance our efforts to combat domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assaults, and stalking. It will give our law enforcement agencies the support they need to enforce and prosecute those crimes. And it will give communities and nonprofits the much-needed resources to support victims of violence, and most importantly, to keep working to stop violence before it ever starts. Madam President, this bill was put forward in a bipartisan fashion. It is supported by hundreds of national and local organizations that deal with this issue every day. It consolidates programs to reduce administrative costs. It adds accountability to make sure tax money is well spent. It builds on what works in the current law, improves what does not, and will help our country continue on the path of reducing violence towards women. And, Madam President, should not be controversial. We reauthorized this law last time here in the Senate unanimously by voice vote, and President Bush signed it into law with Democrats standing there with him. So I am really hopeful that the bipartisan approach to this issue continues today as we work to reauthorize this law once again. Because, Madam President, this shouldn't be about politics. Protecting women against violence should not be a partisan issue. So I want to thank the Democrats and Republicans who've worked together to write this bill. I'm very glad it passed through committee. I stand ready to support this bill when it comes to the floor. And I truly hope we can get President Obama for his signature in a timely fashion so women and families across this country can get the resources and support that this law will deliver. Finally, Madam President, I just have to say, many of us women have come to this floor so many times over the last few weeks to fight back against attempts to turn back the clock when it comes to women's health care, as the senator from California just talked about. I'm disappointed that these issues keep coming up, but I know I stand with millions of men and women across America who remain ready to defend the gains we have made over the last 50 years and who think we should be moving forward, protecting and supporting more women and families, not moving backwards. That's what this bill does. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for your leadership, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from North Carolina is recognized.
I want to thank our presiding officer for bringing this forward, and the other comments from the senator from Washington and the senator from California are really highlighting the issues that we're talking about. But I am proud to join my colleagues to support the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act. And I stand here today during National Women's History Month to urge my colleagues to take swift action on a bill that's critical to the well-being of women, our families, and our country. As Hillary Clinton declared more than 15 years ago in Beijing at the 4th World Conference on Women, human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. If we take bold steps to better the lives of women, we will be taking bold steps to better the lives of children and families too. It is disheartening in the last several months that petty partisanship and gamesmanship has held up policies critical to women's health, including this act. Since its original passage in 1994, the bill has made tremendous progress in protecting women from domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The bill has transformed our criminal justice system and victim support services. It has encouraged collaboration among law enforcement, health and housing professionals, and community organizations to prevent and respond to domestic partner violence. And it has funded programs such as services training officers, prosecutors. It is training officers and prosecutors, and these are called STOP grants, which are used to provide personnel, training, technical assistance, and other equipment to better apprehend and prosecute individuals who commit violence crimes against women. Unfortunately, until Congress takes action on the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act, the well-being of women across our country hangs in the balance. I see this as a serious lapse in our responsibility as U.S. Senators. And as a mother of 2 daughters, I am here to tell you that this reauthorization cannot wait. The rates of violence and abuse in our country are astounding and unacceptable. According to a 2010 CDC survey, domestic violence alone affects more than 12 million people each year. In the year leading up to the CDC study, 1.3 million women were raped. And this study shows that women are severely affected by sexual violence, intimate partner violence, and stalking, with 1 in 4 women falling victim to severe physical violence by an intimate partner. Domestic violence also has a significant impact on our country's health, costing our health system alone over $8.3 billion each year. The reauthorization of this act strengthens and streamlines crucial existing programs that really protect women. In fact, Title V of the reauthorization includes a bill that I sponsored titled Violence Against Women Health Initiative. And this legislation consolidates 3 existing health-focused programs while strengthening the healthcare system's response to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. This initiative fosters public health responses to domestic violence and sexual violence. It provides training and education to help the health professionals respond to what they're seeing from violence and abuse. And it supports research on effective public health approaches to end violence against women. Since my time in the North Carolina State Senate, where I served 10 years, I have been dedicated to combating violence against women. While I was a state senator, I led the effort to ensure that local law enforcement tested rape kits to convict the perpetrators of sexual assault. It was astounding to me to discover that after a woman had been raped and she had an examination where DNA was collected, that rape kit test would actually sit on a shelf in a sheriff or a police station and would not be analyzed. Sadly, the evidence would only be analyzed if a woman could identify her attacker. What other victims in America have to identify their attacker before law authorities will take action? When I first discovered this and brought it up, I was told there was not enough money for every rape kit to be tested. Well, we soon found the money, but there are states today that still have these rape kits sitting on shelves unanalyzed. So for all of the progress we've made, combating violence against women must continue to be a priority, and it must be a priority in every state in the country. So as I take the floor today in support of the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act, it is fitting to recognize one of our fiercest advocates for women's rights, my colleague and mentor, Senator Barbara Mikulski, who on Saturday will become the longest-serving female congressional member in history. For more than 35 trailblazing years, Senator Mikulski has been a strong and unwavering voice for women, families, and the people of her state of Maryland. She shepherded through the Lilly Ledbetter Act, which helps ensure that no matter your gender, race, religion, or age or disability, one will receive equal pay for equal work. And she fought tenaciously for her important amendment to the health care reform legislation, ensuring that preventive care would be covered with no out-of-pocket expense. I thank Senator Mikulski for her mentorship, her leadership, and her fierce advocacy for women's rights. I look forward to continuing to work alongside Senator Mikulski and my colleagues here today to promote policies that support our women, our children, our families, and to put them on a path to a brighter future. Madam President, the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act is central to this goal, and I urge my colleagues to take this bill up and pass it without delay. Madam President, I yield the floor. The Senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, we've now been joined by Senator Murkowski of Alaska.
The Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, I'm proud to be able to stand today to speak about the Violence Against Women Act and joining with some of my colleagues here on the floor. This is legislation that I have supported in the past and look forward to supporting again. As we talk about those issues that women care about, no surprise to most, we're talking about what's happening with the price of gas, what it costs to fill up the car tank. We're talking about the quality of our children's education. We're talking about the Postal Service in Alaska. We had a military town hall, and I met with some of the military spouses, and let me tell you, they were really quite concerned that some of the facilities that they access are perhaps in jeopardy. We care about the security of our jobs, our spouses' jobs, our friends, our neighbors' jobs, all that goes into working in a small business. We certainly care about our country's fiscal situation and the very dire situation that we are in. But something else that we all care about is the violence, the assaults that women often endure, their sisters, their daughters, their neighbors, their friends. And the Violence Against Women Act is an important commitment to victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse that they're not alone. This is a promise that resources and expertise are available to prosecute those who would torment them, and also a reason to believe that one can actually leave an abusive situation and transition to a more stable one. It's one of the greatest importance that victims of domestic violence and sexual assault are confident that there is a safety net available to address them and their immediate survival needs, as well as the needs of their children. Only on this level of confidence can one muster the courage to leave an abusive situation. And these are some of the promises that are contained within the Violence Against Women Act. There's some additional reasons that I feel as strongly as I do about the reauthorization of this act, and it relates to the safety of the people in my state of Alaska. Unfortunately, in as beautiful a state as I live in, our statistics as they relate to domestic violence and sexual assault are horrific. They are as ugly as they come. Nearly 1 in 2 Alaska women have experienced partner violence. Nearly 1 in 3 have experienced sexual violence. Overall, nearly 6 in 10 Alaskan women have been victims of sexual assault or domestic violence. In Alaska, our rate of forcible rape from between 2003 to 2009 was 2.6 times higher than the national rate. And, Madam President, unfortunately, very tragically, about 9% of Alaska mothers reported physical abuse by their husband or partner during pregnancy or in the 12 months prior to pregnancy. We have to do all that we can to get a handle on these tragic statistics, because as we know, they are more than just statistics. These are the lives of our friends, our neighbors, our daughters, and the Violence Against Women Act presents the tools to do so. In the villages of rural Alaska, oftentimes victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence face some pretty unique challenges. Many of these villages have no full-time law enforcement presence whatsoever, nobody to turn to, no safe house, no place to go. A single community health aide must tend to every crisis within the community, including caring for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. Oftentimes, they don't have the tools that they need. They don't have the rape kits. They don't have the training. Oftentimes, you'll have a situation where weather can prove an impediment to getting the victim on an airplane out of the village to one of the shelters in a rural hub. You've got to remember, in most of my communities, 80% of the communities, there's no road out, there's no way to get out. So if you've been violated and there's no law enforcement and there's no shelter and there's nowhere to go, what do you do? Basically, the victim is stranded in her own community with the perpetrator for potentially days before help can arrive. The Violence Against Women Act, I think, is a ray of hope for those who service victims of domestic violence and sexual assault within our villages. It devotes increased resources to rural and isolated communities. It recognizes the Alaska Village Public Safety Officer Program as law enforcement so that VAWA funds can be directed to providing a full-time law enforcement presence in places that currently have none. And it establishes a framework to restart the Alaska Rural Justice and Law Enforcement Commission. This is an important forum for coordination between law enforcement and our Alaska Native leaders to abate the scourge of domestic violence and sexual assault. Madam President, I, too, believe that the Senate needs to take up the Violence Against Women Act, but I do feel strongly that we need to do it on a bipartisan basis. I'm a co-sponsor of this bill. I know some of my colleagues have some concerns, and I've said that we need to take these concerns into account so that we should have, an overwhelmingly bipartisan bill. This is too important an issue for women and men and families that we not address it. Madam President, I know there are others who wish to speak, and I appreciate the indulgence of my colleagues in the few minutes that you've given me. Thank you.
Much the senator from Alaska. We now have about how much time left?
5 minutes.
5 minutes to be equally divided between Senator Mikulski,